Hey, hey, happy Monday, courageous school leaders. It's Dr. D here. I'm glad that you are either just hopping on or you're watching the replay. In either case, thank you so much for taking some time out on this Monday, February 26th, to spend some time with me. So I appreciate that. So, my goal is to come on every Monday around the same time just to have a conversation and share some critical information that impacts our work as school leaders. And so my passion is to empower you all to lead with confidence, right? So that you can transform your instructional culture, right? And in that confidence, you're feeling affirmed and walking in that knowledge. And as a product of public education myself, I advocate for public education. And I believe that we have the power to change the systems that have continually oppressed the most marginalized students in our schools. So, again, thanks for joining us, for joining me, I should say, and anybody else who hops on. Today, we're going to talk about. I had one topic that I am not going to do anymore. I'm going to do it next Monday as a sample for the lead with confidence and clarity without overwhelm training, free training on March 9th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so next Monday, I'm going to give a little sample of what that training is going to be about. So I'm skipping that topic and saving it for next Monday. So make sure you show up next Monday so you can get a sample of what the 3-hour training is going to be about. Well, the actual artifacts and things that you will walk away with, able to implement in your schools the next week. So really tangible things that you'll be able to walk away with. So today's topic is around naturally our schools and what we need to do to improve our schools. And as Margaret Wheatley stated, I love this. Her statement is be brave enough to have the conversations that matter. And this is where it starts, is where we come together and have conversations around the things that are important for public education. And in addition to that, what I always add is what I actually say as I greet you all is courageousness, right? Like having the courageous conversations is so necessary to disrupt what we need to do for kids. Um, so let's get into it. I want to share an article from Education Week that talks about, pardon me, talks about low performing schools. Um, and we talk about it all the time, right? But I know, like, have you ever considered like the profound impact that the data has on shaping the educational landscape, like especially for Black and Brown kids? Um, I know I think about it quite often. It's me and my colleagues have conversations repeatedly, like I'm sure you do. Um, like, what are we doing and what needs to change so that we can move the lever even more for especially our most marginalized kids, specifically black and brown kids. So today we're going to dive into the crux of that matter, where numbers do more than just add up, right? Like they actually tell a story, and that is the work. Is actually using data in a way where it informs you what you need to do next, right? And using the research as a foundation for the moves that you make, right? And that helps build your confidence and leadership as well because you're using research that informs the next steps that you have to make. So let's take a look at this article here. What I will do after this live is put all of the links as comments so that you have access to it. This article was written last week, um, and it talks about um, specific. The act it talks about is the Every Student Succeeds Act, and they talk about how when it was introduced in 2015, um, everybody jumped on it. Right, bipartisan vote was everyone was in agreement with like, okay, we need to do something. This is something that needs to happen for kids. So the ESSA Act, which is Every Student Succeeds Act, mandates that states identify um, and provide support to rejuvenate the bottom 5% of schools, right? Along with high schools that are suffering high dropout rates, right? Um, through what is now called comprehensive school improvements, right? So CSI, which are the schools that I work with, specifically working with the principals in CSI schools, right? They're the ones that have the most need. And so this act really focuses on the bottom 5% of those schools. Um, and so while money has been put aside to provide more additional support for these schools, there's still like it's still not working, right? Something is not working. We have to go back to the drawing board. And so there's been some research done, and I learned from reading through this article that there is a investigation arm of Congress called the Government Accountability Office, which makes so much sense. It makes so much sense in that they want to investigate how money is being spent. It's just logical, right? Like government is giving this money. We want to know how it's being if it's being effective, how it's being spent, so that they can redirect the money in other ways, right? Because remember, I think about 2 weeks ago, I talked about House HR House Resolution 5894, where it's on the table to be voted to actually cut Title One and Title Two funds by billions of dollars, right? It's still on the table now. There hasn't been any other actions on that House resolution right now. And when they are, I will provide updates. But so going back to what I was saying about the accountability arm, the GAO did some research on the ESSA Act to see how well, how effective federal funds are working in schools, right? In addition to the GAO, there was another organization called uh, All for Ed here, an equity focused research advocacy organization, also did some research on the effectiveness of um, the federal funds, how it's being spent, if and actually if the process is being like if schools are using the process that has been required through this act, right? And so the reality from this data is that um, it's like a concerning reality, right? Like less than half of the state approved improvement plans, right? When you click on this link here that in this article, which I will share in the comments, it takes you to this article, right? 43-page article from Congress's investigation arm, and says just a sample size of schools, of CSI schools, um, out of the sample size, right? Because there are thousands of schools across the United States that fall under this umbrella of comprehensive school improvement. But a sample size of those schools, less than 42% appear to address all of the three requirements as it reviewed its records, right? And the three requirements being there has to be a needs assessment, they have to inequities have to be identified, like the resource inequities. And then the third one is evidence-based interventions, right? Less than 42% of the sample size of CSI schools did not have those things, right? Some had some of them, some had none of them, right? So we're talking about the numbers, okay, and the impact that the numbers have. So picture this. This means that nearly 60% of these low performing schools have an overwhelming majority of students that are reliant on free and reduced price lunch, which indicate high poverty, right? That these schools, who are often serving predominantly Black populations, this is not just statistics, right? This is about the young lives that we are impacting that are being shortchanged by these systemic inadequacies, right? So ESSA filters down into the states filter it down into the LEAs, which filter into the districts and the schools. But in reading this article, one of the things that I found truly interesting in this Education Week article is that when they interviewed school based folks, a lot of school leaders were unsure of what uh, uh, like the meaning of some terms were, right? Like, what does it mean to like what are resources that inequities, right? Like, what are evidence based strategies? What you like? How do I find a needs assessment? Those are the things that a lot of school leaders, based on this article, said that they were unsure of what those things actually meant, which means that our state departments need to do a better job supporting naturally the districts, right? Because the federal government left it up to the states to determine how schools are going to meet those three things, which were um, needs assessment, resource inequities, and evidence-based strategies, right? So the federal government just said, states, you guys figure out how to do it. The states haven't done a good job of supporting the LEAs and the districts in getting this done. Um, but there is some hope for school leaders, right? Like there are things, and this is the part of courageous leadership that I talk about so much, is that decisions are being made all the time. And I truly believe that it's in the best interest of education, right? That decisions are being made all the time, but you, with your boots on the ground in the school, you know exactly what it is your school needs, right? So if we're thinking about the three things that must be met in CSI schools, comprehensive school improvement schools, right? Which is again, needs assessment, resource inequities, and evidence based strategies, let's talk about how school leaders can begin to do that, right? So, one of the things in terms of the needs assessment, let's look at an example. They showed an example in this article of a school district in North Carolina, Union County, where the superintendent of that county decided to uh, garner the support of the community, and employed a mix of evidence based strategies, right? Such as intensive tutoring and mental health supports, right? To help lift the school from underperforming, and has been doing a phenomenal job in that regard, right? And we're talking about CSI schools. We're talking about low performing schools. So before you say those kids are not like mine, yeah, they are. Okay. Underperforming schools, period. And so in devoting the time to connect with the community and find out what the community wants and needs, um, he rallied support. And so that's what you need. Like that's one thing that you can do. Like move courageously, engage with your community, explain why behind your actions, right? So that you can build like a coalition of dedicated adults who are really about making a difference. Because sometimes when you move as leaders, not sometimes, every single move you make as a leader is under scrutiny, right? And so if you are communicating your why, like that's your core, that's your center, why you're doing the things you're doing, um, communicate it frequently, often, before you do like act on something. Like gather feedback from your stakeholders before making a move, right? Like, you know in your mind where you want to go, but gathering support from your stakeholders is really critical for the support to make the moves, right? And one of the things that meant that this article mentioned about this superintendent, here he is right here, about this superintendent is that he made decisions that was in the best interest of his school district, even if it went against what the state department said that they had to do. He took it in, like, took matters into his own hands, and you have the power to do that, right? That's why you are deemed the leader of your school. Okay. So move courageously, connect and engage with your community to garner support. The other thing that can be done now, moving on to resources, because that's one of the three that we talked about is community, like um, a needs assessment, garnering support and information from your community can help meet that need. The second thing was um, resource equity, right? Like focusing on that. So it's not just about having resources, right? It's about the distribution of those resources and making sure that people are getting what they need to be successful. Not equal, but getting what they need to be successful, right? So really scrutinize your school, like the resources that your school has to ensure that it is meeting the needs of all of your students and specifically your most vulnerable students, your ELL students, your students with special education, like special education needs, your high poverty students, right? Your most vulnerable students should be at the forefront when you're thinking about the resources that you are getting, the federal funds that you are getting, right? As a comprehensive school in improvement. That's that's the equity piece right there, right? This can mean advocating for more funding if you need to, right? Like again, this is where that first step is your needs assessment. When you are engaging with your community, you can guard, like if you're being transparent about what your school needs. Trust me, parents want the same thing you want, right? So, some even more because these are their babies in the building. So make sure you're being transparent about what's needed when you are, because then you'll have support when you're asking for more funding. Okay. Another thing that you can possibly do is reduce the student to teacher ratio, which I know is very difficult to do. And the article shares in here too about how um, that it was found that, CSI schools have more students in a classroom than non CSI schools, which is not surprising, right? Um, So, um, think about how you can balance out those student teacher ratios by being really creative with how you are using your resources, which are adults in this matter. How you're using your resources in that way, and then you can reallocate your existing resources to where they needed the most. Again, this is about the most vulnerable students. Okay, so that's the equity piece, the resources and equity. The third thing that's needed in review when the GAO comes into review states and how they are meeting those three needs. The third one is the evidence, like evidence of research based strategies, right? So you can use resources like the U.S. Department of Education's What Works Clearinghouse to find strategies that have been proven to be effective if you're unsure, right? Because there's so much research out there that you don't know what your state has deemed as a research based effective strategy, right? Because there's, again, lots of research, but you have to do the one that your state is saying, like, okay, yep, this is the one. And so I will drop that link in the comments as well. But this is what the website looks like. What Works Clearinghouse has the information that you are looking for about reviewing studies, right? Um, so make sure you're using that and you can tailor the strategies, right? That's the thing too. Like we are one of the beautiful things about being alive is that we are free. We have freedom to think for ourselves. We have freedom to we're just free. It's a wonderful thing to embrace, right? And so I know when I as a school leader myself, I felt like I did not have like I was bound by this um unseen, fence or a rope that that didn't permit me to think and act in the way that like act in my authentic self. I felt like I had to follow every single thing that the district told me I had to do because especially as a new leader, I was like, "Okay, well, this is, they're telling me best. They know, so let me just follow their lead." And it didn't take long for me to find out after the first and second year, like, they're just spinning their wheels because they're trying to figure it out too, right? Um, Let me make decisions that I know are in the best interest of kids based on the research and keeping kids at the forefront, right? Like that was my why. That was my core. And I communicated that to my school community, and they all came to know it, right? And understand it. And they do move with you when they know that you are about that business, because that's what it's about, right? So remember when you're looking at these research based strategies in the What Works Clearinghouse, tailor it for your school community. Do not you don't have to follow it to the letter as it is in the research. Use the research, be courageous, be innovative, right? And use that research information in a way that fits your school's needs because there is no one size fits all. We know that, right? Education is constantly evolving. We have needs um, that surface all the time from our staff and our students, our school community. So use that information for to support what your school needs so that you can specifically tailor it for your school. Okay. So let's go back. There are three things right here that the government based on ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, is looking for when they come in schools. They're looking for that your school improvement plans and evidence, right? Your SANE documents are showing that you have created, like, or be based on a needs assessment. And we talked about how you can engage with your school community to find out and have evidence of that documents. If it's not in black and white, honey, it ain't happening. Make sure it's in black and white. The second thing that they're looking for is how have schools identified the resources to be equitable, right? And we talked about how you can really take a look at your school's allocation, garner support to get more school funding, try to reduce your student teacher ratios, right? Reallocate the existing resources you have for your most vulnerable students. Document all of that. That's what they're looking for. Not just speaking it, but you have to document it, right? It's not black and white. It ain't happening. And then the third thing is including evidence-based interventions, right? Using this website, which I'm going to put below. Check it out. Look at and this is a government based, like this is what the government is saying is the research that states should be looking at for like to support instruction. Don't veer from this, right? Use it and then tailor it for your school. Okay. So I hope that this has been helpful. If you are watching the replay, drop some comments in the chat. Let me know if this was helpful for you in any way, shape, or form. And let's keep the conversation going, right? Like, um, it's really important for us to remember to look at data and how it's impacting how we move as school leaders, right? Because the data is going to tell us what things we need to ignore, right? The busy stuff, and what are the things that are really, 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 really important. So, yeah, I hope that that was helpful for you. And drop some comments in the chat so we can keep the conversation going. I'm going to put the links in the comment section so that you have access to it. And I hope to see you next Monday for the little teaser sample for the Lead with Clarity and Confidence Without Overwhelm training happening March 9th at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So keep going, brave leaders. I need you to keep going. Do not stop. We need you. Okay. We need you. Remember, like transforming, changing instructional culture and addressing the needs of our most marginalized kids isn't just a job. Like it should be a passion that you have that's driving you every single day. And I know you're doing it, right? And it is exhausting, but when you cut out the noise and focus on the things that have the biggest impact, you will find that you are making having a larger impact on your school community, right? And so these steps that we talked about are not just like actions, right? It's a commitment, and I know you're committed. So regardless of your student zip code, every student has a right to have access to an opportunity, access to opportunities. And the way to do that is through education. And so I know that you share this same vision. Um, and let me know what you think about in the chat. And I'm going to drop the links for you. And I hope to see you next Monday for another What Are Your Thoughts? Okay. Keep going, school leaders. Have a great evening.